दूसरा वाला नहीं करना चाहिए, तो बात खत्म हो गई। दूसरी बात ये है कि बार बार मैं ये कह रहा हूँ, पीटीआई हमारे सामने नहीं, मैं कह के थक गया हूँ कि भाई वो क्यों नहीं आए, क्यों नहीं मांग रहे हैं। वो तो सुन्नी इत्तेहाद काउंसिल को सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, कह रहे हैं इनको मिलनी चाहिए। बात अब ये है उनको मिलना चाहिए या नहीं मिलना चाहिए, ये हमारे सामने केस है। अब एक हम अपने तौर पे एक नया केस बनाएं तो हमें नहीं समझ आ रहा है।
And the follow-up question to that perhaps is if I've understood my Lord Mr. Syed Mansoor Ali Shah and the leadership.
मखदूम साहब, ये देखिए प्रोपोर्शनल रिप्रेजेंटेशन सिस्टम से जो मैं समझाऊं क्या ये दुरुस्त है कि प्रोपोर्शनल रिप्रेजेंटेशन सिस्टम कंसिस्ट्स ऑफ टू पार्ट्स. In the first part, the seats are allocated to a political party based on the general seats secured by it. And in the second part, those seats are allocated to the party affiliated candidates. Is it so? Is it correct?
No, it is not. ऐसा नहीं.
My Lord,
पहले हिस्से के अंदर जो पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज जनरल सीट सिक्योर करती हैं उसके बेसिस पर उसका कोटा कैलकुलेट होता है, एंड दैट सीट्स ऑफ द कोटा इज गिवन टू द पार्टी एफिलिएटेड कैंडिडेट्स. अगर ऐसे ही है तो फर्स्ट स्टेप के ऊपर एबीसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज का जो कोटा बना है वो सब्सिक्वेंटली इनहांस कैसे हो सकता है?
my Lord,
और अगर वो इनहांस नहीं हो सकता तो फिर आप कैसे आ गए?
my Lord, the submission is that when you take the quota or you take the, I will take the words, when you proportionately distribute the number of seats,
Yes.
the distribution has to take place between political parties. These seats will be distributed between political parties on a proportionate basis after excluding independents.
So now the question is that those independents that have been excluded and we're not counting them, and you get the benefit of those independents being excluded, where is the proportionality in that?
The proportionality
Because now it's not representative of the electorate, what the electorate has said. So you see, I see a conflict here and a contradiction, because you're saying that that political party was not allowed, is not a political party, so those 84 seats cannot be counted as being part of the seats secured by that political party. If they are counted, then there is some proportionality. But if we take it out, then we have a new concept of proportionality, and that will be amongst the political party on what is there amongst the political parties to be seen as what are the seats against which they're going to calculate it. But it's proportional representation to the seats secured or won, as I was saying, won the general election. So then if you get the of those 86 independents who are no longer now allowed to be given against that any reserve seat, where is the proportion in that?
Mr. Makhdoom, I can add to this and maybe you can just answer them. What I understand of the proportional representation is that the proportional representation has to be maintained within the house of the political parties. I'm with you on the independents being excluded, but the political parties must have a the way, whatever they have won as the general seats, that's the representation. Now that representation must not be affected. So on the basis of that representation, the seats that they have won, they are now entitled to a certain reserved seats. So we'll work out the percentage of every political party that works out the number of seats that they've, because there is and this problem has arisen because there's a large number of independents, otherwise this question would not have arisen. But because a larger chunk has been taken away by the independents, that's why this problem. There will always be seats left out because there's a huge chunk of the independents that could have been a political party. The seats could have gone to that. So the representation within the parliament of the political parties, which the seats that they've won, that's the representation, that cannot be affected. So that cannot be affected if we were just to take their, whatever they've won and calculate their share out of the reserve quota accordingly. Utna milta jayega. Jis tarah maine, I go back to my example and makes things very clear to me that there is only one political party with one seat and the rest are independents. This one vote would entitle them to a certain percentum in the reserved seats. That could be perhaps one for the sake of argument. And that's it. They can't say that we are just one political party with one seat in the parliament. We'll get 70 now. Is that possible?
Why not? Is it
My Lord,
possible? Because when the Constitution says so.
I think it doesn't say that
That's
way.
exact. My Lord, for instance, let's add to it a little bit. Let's assume there are two
Mr.
political.
Makhdoom Ali Khan, why don't we go, are we going to rewrite the constitution yet again?
My lord, I stand at too humble a station to say that.
I don't know. I just give this document respect. All the problems of Pakistan stem from when this document is disrespected. New interpretations of some Austrian philosopher comes into the pure Kelsen theory of law and this, that, the other. We've mauled this constitution enough times.
Chale, for my benefit,
My lord
I'm not
said,
as
well, that's
enlightened
about time
as
that
the
we
Chief
start.
Justice.
Can
आप
I-
समझा दें
can-
proportionality.
Can I conclude if you permit? Can we just stick to the constitution, or is that not fashionable anymore? Or is that not binding on us? What does Article 5 say? Please read that. Does it give us the power to think whatever we think best for the country, to impose on the country?
My lord,
Article 5 is very clear. It's an obligation on every person to abide by the constitution. You don't like the constitution, go and amend it.
My lord, as I
With greatest respect to the Honorable Chief Justice, we say, is there a room for understanding the constitutional provision differently or not? There could be a possibility I'm reading it differently. Maybe I need to be understood and brought back onto the right track. Maybe I'm making a mistake, but I read it differently. Not saying that I'm rewriting or anything. I'm looking at it differently. So I do get the right to at least say what I think of the provision.
Lord, I regard the observation of your lordships and the differences of opinion as a constitutional conversation, which is enlightening for me.
Mr. Let me ask you one question, because you are quite properly laying a great deal of emphasis on the reserve lists that are to be submitted, because that's there in the paragraph. Now, suppose a general election takes place. I just want clarity on what you are saying about independence and how things happen. Suppose a general election takes place, a political party fields candidates, right? So there's no dispute, no election symbol, there's nothing, simple, vanilla type election. Whatever reason, inadvertence, oversight, whatever, don't file their reserve seats list, right? And in the general election, say 10 candidates are returned for this political party, that on the basis of proportional representation would give them, say, one reserved seat in the Now, they don't actually have a reserved list. According to you, these 10 candidates who admittedly fought the election on a party basis were returned on that basis, but are they to be, for purposes of the paragraph, are they to be excluded and the reserved seats proportionality calculated on the basis of whatever the other political parties have, or if they are to be included within among, as you say, among the political parties, but you are at the same time say, well, there's no reserve list. So what would happen there? I mean, what's your reading or interpretation?
My lord, my submission is there may be two situations. One is, as your lordship has articulated, that a political party gets 5 MNAs, for instance, from Balochistan, which entitles it
Whatever
to
it
one
is.
seat. Yes, because I'm going by the constitutional number. And it entitles them to one reserved seat. But they have not filed a list. There are 2 or 3 consequences which are attached to it. First, there has to be a list. Then the candidate has to file his nomination papers.
Yes, but nothing like that has happened.
No, nothing. So all of that has not happened.
But the 5 seats are there, and if those that political party, in your formulation, among the political parties is among those political parties, it would arithmetically get 1 seat. But you are laying a lot of emphasis on the existence of the reserved seats, the prior existence. Well, there's no reserve seat here. So what will then happen? Would those 10 or 5, whatever those returned candidates are of a political party, be deemed somehow for purposes of the paragraph to be quote unquote independent, and everyone else gets to share it? What?
My submission is that the way I see it, my lord, the constitutional scheme is that if no list for reserved parties is submitted, no priorities allocated, no nomination papers filed, so on and so forth, I need not go through all that list, then that political party has chosen not to contest for the reserved seats. So they are out of the race and that will be distributed amongst the rest. That's my submission.
लेकिन इसमें
That is your submission, which is what the Constitution says. As simple as that.
इसमें मखदूम साहब, Justice Shah and Justice her ladyship, उनका जो question है, that is very relevant. The first limb of that question, as I understand, is whether it is mandatory that the House is complete. As I read sub-article 1 of Article 51, there is no such compulsion, or it is not mandatory that it has to be complete. The second limb is that according to the proportionate representation system, each political party would get only such seats as are in ratio to what they have secured in the general elections, not more than that. आपसे जो बार-बार सवाल पूछा जा रहा है, I mean, prima facie, my reading of the article is that it is not mandatory that the assembly is complete, because there's a distinction between seats and members. It does not say that the National Assembly shall consist of so many members. It is seats and then members. Secondly, how can you get seats more than what you have secured, you see? That is the question.
Yes, Manoj.
यहीं पे इसको सप्लीमेंट कर लीजिए. मैंने अपने क्वेश्चन को थोड़ा सा दोबारा रिफ्रेश करता हूँ कि इस्लामिक लॉ ऑफ इनहेरिटेंस के अंदर के शेयर्स को तमाम स्टेट डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हो जाए और लेफ्ट ओवर होती है, फिर प्रिंसिपल ऑफ रिटर्न अप्लाई होता है. प्रोपोर्शनेट रिप्रेजेंटेशन के अंदर क्या प्रिंसिपल ऑफ रिटर्न अप्लाई होता है? अगर नहीं होता तो फिर मेरा सवाल है कि हाउ यू गॉट द सीट्स.
My lord, I would not import the laws of inheritance. That's a very complicated law on its own into the constitutional law. But may I go back to constitutional law, and may I make a submission on constitutional law? On constitutional law, my submission is that the House needs to be complete insofar as possible. There are exigencies as articulated by my Lord Justice Muni Bakhtar, where people may die, people may resign, people may decide to retire and submit a resignation, and then the Constitution provides how those are to be filled in, as happens in the case of vacancies on this honorable court. And that does not make the court dysfunctional, but there is also a period where these seats cannot be filled in, as articulated by my Lord Justice Muni Bakhtar, and that too is provided for in the Constitution. Over here, the proportional representation system is based on a proportionate division between the political parties. The independents, to start with, are excluded from the mix. To take my Lord Mr. Syed Mansoor Ali Shah's example, if in a house of 236, there were to be 2 political parties and 234 independents, because the proportion is in terms of the Constitution between the political parties, it may sound extreme, but my submission on the language of the Constitution is that the reserved seats will be divided equally between them.
But what we're not reading in this is the seats secured by them in the General Assembly. So the general seats secured by them. So these 2 political parties, the next question would be, these 2 political parties have secured how many seats in the House?
Yes.
And then if they've secured 1 each, they would have a corresponding share in the reserve. That's it. If 100 seats each, then they'll have a corresponding share in the reserve seats. But they can't just take the whole lot just because they're a political party.
My Lord, if that were to be correct, then with great respect, may I submit what will happen? That if there are 20 independents, because they do not represent a political party and they're excluded from the proportionate distribution, then those number of reserved seats will have to go vacant each time. So, but that is
So, Mr.
historically,
Makhdoom,
to
the
start-
question, as I said, it's a unique question because this would not have arisen because of the complexion of the independents in the scheme. So we'll have to probably rely on which is a more sacrosanct and a higher principle. Is representativeness a higher principle, or is leaving some seats vacant another principle? Which is a higher principle? Could proportional representation, which comes out of the Constitution, not a higher principle that must be ensured at all times, and vacant seats would be a secondary principle which we can live with, but the other one cannot compromise or trump the other.
My lord, may I respectfully say the Constitution says, in accordance with law, through proportional representation of political parties' lists of candidates on the basis of total number of general seats.
On the basis is
on the basis, so independents are out. Now, let us say if there are 100 independents and they don't join any political party, what is to be done with the 60 seats for women? Are they to be proportionately reduced? That can be one way of looking at the Constitution. My respectful submission is no, because the House needs to be complete insofar as possible.
At the risk of, when you're completing the House, at the risk of changing the representativeness, that's a higher principle being offended.
No, my lord. No, my lord. With respect, may I submit? No higher principle gets offended.
Mr. Makhdoom Ali Khan, एक second, just started. When you're talking about principles, please can you refer to the Constitution where this is listed?
No, the Constitution over here recognizes.
Is the concept of principle mentioned in the Constitution?
We're expounding the
No,
Constitution. are we not?
I'm just asking the learned counsel, is it or not?
My lord, my submission is that it is not.
But there is a principle. Please read Article 5(2).
Yes.
No,
yes.
please read it. Let's yes करके हम इसको इतना आराम से नजरअंदाज ना करें.
Obedience to the Constitution and law is the inviolable obligation of every citizen, wherever he may be, and of every other person for the time being within
This
Pakistan.
is the only principle enunciated in the Constitution, and I hope you don't mind my saying so. We are so indulgent of autocratic rule, और आप भी रह चुके हैं डिक्टेटर के अटॉर्नी जनरल. वो वक्त था जब मैंने वकालत छोड़ दी थी, पता नहीं कितने साल, जब तक वो जजेस रिस्टोर नहीं हुए. ठीक है, हम जब भी कोई जमहूरियत आती है तो हम छुरियां निकाल के आ जाते हैं सामने, और जब भी कोई डिक्टेटर आता है तो फौरन उसके साथ हो जाते हैं, मिनिस्टर बन जाते हैं, अटॉर्नी जनरल बन जाते हैं. असूल की बात करना है तो बड़ा असूल बात करें. सबसे बड़ा असूल ये है आइन का असूल. ये आइन का असूल पे क्यों नहीं गामजन है? ये प्रिंसिपल और वो प्रिंसिपल, वो कंसेंसस थ्योरी ऑफ लॉ, इसी ने तो पाकिस्तान को तबाह करके रख दिया है. अब आप चलें, आईनी कोर्ट हैं, आइन की बातें करें. कहाँ लिखा है कि हम फलां प्रिंसिपल इंपोर्ट कर लें, वो इंग्लिस्तान के जज ने क्या कहा है और उसके जज ने क्या कहा? पहले बताएं कि जी इस पे जबान इसकी वाजे नहीं है, आगे बढ़ते हैं, बता दीजिए हम. तो ये आइन तकद्दुस है. ये आपकी मर्जी नहीं है कि आप इसको फॉलो करें, नहीं, आपको करना लाजिम है. आप पे, हम पे डबल लाजिम है, इसलिए क्योंकि हम ओथ ले लेते हैं कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का, आप नहीं लेते ओथ. आई होप यू डोंट माइंड दीज ऑब्जर्वेशंस, बट दीज आर द फैक्ट्स ऑफ, वी टॉक अबाउट हिस्ट्री, लेट्स टॉक अबाउट कंप्लीट हिस्ट्री ऑफ पाकिस्तान. देन
My lord, may I?
Makhdoom Saab.
can you respond to this?
Makhdoom
Can you
Saab.
please respond?
Makhdoom
We'll
Saab.
give you a break. We'll
Makhdoom
give you a
Saab.
break
Makhdoom
to
Saab.
ponder over it.
Makhdoom
and
Saab.
we'll take
Makhdoom
it up
Saab.
after this.
I welcome it, my lord.
I think that
Makhdoom Saab, with great respect, today the Constitution is not being upheld. Whatever is happening, everyone knows. And everyone is pretending as if we are only talking about the past. Today, let this court not be seen as complicit. That is why it is so important to secure the rights of the people. Everyone has made mistakes in the past. No one is an angel, but there has to be a resolve to say one day, enough is enough. Today,
if I may add, we should also acknowledge our mistakes.
As a Supreme Court, today, we have buried our heads in the sand, and we don't want to face the reality. But ultimately it will be our responsibility for every human right violation that is happening today, the enforced disappearances. I mean, we don't let them speak. We say that it's a political issue. It is not a political issue.
My lord.
It is about the constitution, the grave violations that are taking place. We cannot shut our eyes. And again, I would say, speaking for myself, the most important petition that is pending in this court is regarding the alleged irregularities on 8th of February elections. And it's known to everyone.
My lord, council have their limitations. Your lordship sitting at that exalted position can say things which may expose me to the law of contempt.
Mr. Makhdoom,
I have to
I think this calls for a cup of tea.
ठीक है चलें
Thank you.
Please.